take me home tonight. Oh, down beside that red firelight. Oh, you gonna let it all hang out. Fat bottom girls, you make the rockin' world go round.
Hello, and welcome to your online strength coach, episode 49, Understanding the Deload. Hello, and welcome to episode 49 of your online strength coach podcast. As regular listeners will appreciate, it has been a couple of weeks since I've last done one of these, for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, as if you're a regular listener, you will know I was on holiday in Cyprus, in Paphos, which if you haven't been to, I would highly recommend. Great destination, great food, great people, and plenty of history, knock around, Roman ruins, a couple of really nice archaeological sites, and the museum's not amazing, but it's got plenty of artifacts in there if you're into that period of history. Definitely worth a visit. If you're into kebabs, it's certainly worth a visit. If you're into meat in general, it's definitely worth a visit. If you're into beer, maybe not so much. I found the local beer Kio is quite decent. It's a lager. It tastes reasonably well. It's a lot better than Spanish beers. However, it's the beer out there has not been gentrified like it has been in the UK, so I found it a bit of a struggle, to be honest with you. Anyway, it's not the holiday and beer podcast. It is the strength coach podcast. And then this week's just been manic, to be honest with you. Spent Monday and Tuesday just kind of getting back into my normal workflow. Wednesday I spent with Mrs. We went to Loch Lomond, which I've not been to, which is lovely. If you live in Scotland, haven't been, would advise you take a little look. And then today I've started work at like 6:30, and it's now 3 minutes to 11, and I just sat down like 20 minutes ago. So yeah, that podcast of a day in life of full-time strength conditioning coaching professional sport will be coming at some stage soon. It's probably not as fun as illustrious as some people probably think it is. Anyway, on to the topic. After 2 minutes and 30 seconds of diatribe, I've been looking for a bit of fodder, to be honest. Obviously, there's not been a lot of questions in the last little while on this podcast. So I've been posting on Slugden forums. I've been posting on Slugden barbell forums for a number of years now. They're very good forums. They're not as active as they used to be, but they are very good forums. There's a lot of strong lifters on there, and there's a few very smart guys on there as well who are based in the UK. A few very good trainers. One of the questions asked on one of the threads, which I'll bring up now, which I've responded to, and I think for the sake of for the full understanding for people who maybe don't post on Slugden Barbell or can't see the thread, I will post the link in the thread. I'll probably post the video in the thread as well, just to whore myself out a little bit. Hope people don't mind too much. The importance of deloads by Buddha. This is a controversial question. Does a deload impact performance? In American powerlifting, in the West Side style training, lead FDS, Jim Wendler, there's often the necessity of deloads. They are very important. Is this true or just American bias? When you look to more effective and more result-based lifters in East Europe, you find particularly no lifters who do the traditional deload 50%. The Japanese powerlifters actually train without deloads and never stop training. They just rest if there is an injury. Chico lowers the percent, but still one time in 12 weeks. Norwegians also don't deload. So the question is, do deloads result in greater strength, or are they just a rooted myth that is popularized among American powerlifters? By the way, I asked Shilko. There will be a video that addresses the topic, and Puzdiev says yes to deloads, but they are just somewhat 70-80% deloads. Then there's a couple of sorry, Ian. Some more informed replies. The Lone Wolf replies, they have a place, but it's highly individual. There is only so long someone can train 100% before something goes wrong. Alex 76. In my opinion, they're only important if you're overreaching enough to need them. They're probably best done by reducing volume rather than weight in the bar. For most lifter, life throws up deloads often enough not to bother training them. Adam T. I have seen a big difference with when deloading. I like to deload after 6 weeks. I guess many more advanced lifters deload less. I never deloaded for years until the last few months. I am still weak, but I've improved a lot. In the least in a while. Fazik, or Faz-C, I don't know how to pronounce that, mate. You can't talk about deloads without discussing the entire plan. It's situational. Within the context of one plan, they'll be necessary. Within the context of another, they won't. What's more important is whether the plan makes sense and works within what we know about periodization. How you accomplish that whole rest-work relationship isn't important. The fact you do is. And then I responded, you should have lighter periods of training in your plan on a regular basis. I don't think it should be discussed as a deload, more the start of a new accumulation phase or planned detraining after a peak. If you use an overreach or concentrated loading week, you generally need 2 weeks to realize the benefits. First week with reduced volume and intensity, next week with slight increase. I think if your training plan leaves you physically in need of a deload week, you're training with far too much intensity and volume and should look at your training closely. So that's, I don't know if I really should have read it the entire thread, but I need to fill out the podcast somehow, you know. Just to give you kind of an idea, because I thought a lot of those posts were fairly well informed and definitely warranted reading out. Fazik, I thought, made some very good points there. Adam T also made some good points, as in his experiences from him seeing the usefulness of the deload kind of come into that individuality. Alex76 made some great points. The Lone Wolf made a very good point. Whereas if you train with 100% intensity, something's going to go wrong eventually. I think within the actual original post, we can see some things. Firstly, we can see that the West Side training systems, or the Jim Wendler training systems, that 50% intensity deload is basically a waste of time, to be honest with you. It's not. You don't really achieve anything with that training week. If you're looking to achieve something, you've probably just trained too hard in the last 3 weeks, and if you require that 50% week, obviously 5-3-1 works to an extent. I think saying Jim Wendler or 5-3-1 as a West Side style training is a bit unfair on the program. I don't think it does take some things from West Side, but I don't think it really takes too much from West Side, to be honest. So I think that's a bit unfair on Jim Wendler. And also calling it a steroid myth is just not really doing any justice to the topic. But if you look at some of these things, if you look at the Japanese lifters never taking a deload until they get injury, should you load a tissue until it breaks and that's your deload? I would think not, so I think that's probably an error. Norwegians don't deload. Well, what's their training intensities like? How do they cycle it? Like, what they might, if they do a 5-week training block where they train with higher frequency. If you'll know something about powerlifting, you'll know they train 6 times a week. They train squats every day, do variations, do bench every day, do variations, do deadlift probably 3 times a week. We'll do it with variations. But they don't train with like high intensities. They train with a high volume through the week, but they don't train with huge sessional volumes. It's more accumulated through the week as it should be. And Shilko's plans again will have a heavy volume accumulation aspect to them. There isn't a lot of intensity in it. Fatigue is built up more slowly when intensity is lower and volume is higher. The build up of fatigue is much more gradual, especially if it's done intelligently. If you tread the line well, if your volumes and your intensities line up correctly or in sequence well, then the build up of fatigue is very slow. And in fact, with the correct kind of build up, as the volume increases, the lifter's ability to handle volumes, the lifter's ability to lift with greater intensities, the lifter's ability to train, their training ability increases as the blocks go on. And it's only when you start to realize these peaks through intensity, or start realizing these increased, or if you cash a check in, as it were, with these training cycles, that you'll actually need to deload, because you'll peak, and after a peak comes a trough. You basically, once you hit that kind of level, or you hit that, once you kind of peak out and utilize all the momentum you've built, then you need to start the process again, because you'll just stagnate if you try to keep going. The way I think I would look at this question is, I think we go back to what Fazik said. It depends on the program. It depends on the situation. Depends what you're doing. If you look within an annualized training plan, are you going to need periods of lighter training within that annualized training plan? I would fucking hope so. I should curse less on my podcast. When we look at let's say we have 3 competitions in our calendar, do we need to deload after every competition? Well, it depends. Do we peak for a competition? So let's say within our 3 competitions, we have a national or a regional level. So that could be in my instance, that may be a Scottish level meet, or if you live in the south of England, it could be your South of England Championships. If you live in the USA, it could be your state championships. Then you have your proper national meet. So for us in the UK, it's the British. For those in France, it'll be the French. The full your country level meet. Which if you're not an international level lifter, this will typically be your peak. This will be your most important competition. If you're strong enough or lucky enough to be an international lifter, then normally your peaks will be World Championships, European Championships. So basically, you might choose 1 or 2 competitions within a year or within an annualized cycle to properly peak for. After those competitions, you're going to require a lighter period of training. It depends on who's coaching you, but you're gonna need a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of either maybe a week off followed by two or 3 weeks of lighter training, like a reintroduction to training, more of a general prep phase. Within a 12-month plan, there should be general preparation phases. These general preparation phases might utilize different exercises, might utilize higher volumes, lower intensities, might utilize different implements, dumbbells, funny bars. So within these scenarios, these are deloads in the year. So as a powerlifter, when you train specifically for squat, bench, and deadlift, you train with high volume loads, and a volume load is an intensity times the volume. When your volume loads are high and your intensities are high and you're cyclically peaking week in, week out, if you say you train like that for 6 months and then you do a competition and then you take a detraining period of 3 weeks, that's a deload in that kind of sense. Where I would push to, though, is if you look at the Poziev, when he's saying he takes deloads of 76%, 80%, those are that's like lighter periods of training. It's not necessarily deloads. Let's say, for instance, a 3-week cycle could be 5x5 is 75%. I use this one all the time because it fucking works great. 5x5 is 75%. 5x4 80%. 5x3 at 85%. That's a 3-week cycle, and you just run that cycle. You don't do another week. You just rerun and rerun and rerun. Maybe if you start with a lighter max, or you deliberately maybe if your max is 200, maybe start with 190. So effectively, you're starting with like 72%, 82%, or 72%, 77%, 82%. So you're starting off with like kind of a lighter max, and you accumulate volume, and you do like a volume accumulation, transmutation, realization, sort of in a 3-week period or 3-week kind of mini cycle, and you run that 3-week mini cycle over and over and over and over and over and over until it peters out, because you haven't been smart with your programming. In that sense, you do 1 session a week, and you rely on that 1 session a week to kind of get you where you want to go. That little 3-week block and those 3 sessions are in essence what you should do with your programming. You should have a period of lower intensity, higher volume, moderate intensity, moderate volume, low volume, high intensity within your program. And the more nuanced you are with it, the more experienced you are with putting the programs together, the better that's going to be interwoven together. So if you look at someone like Shilko's programming, he uses that exact process or that exact way of putting it together, but he puts it together in a very finely tuned way. everything's interwoven together, and it's, if you look at his volume and intensity graphs, like they're very like up and down, up and down, up and down. Sets and reps are here, sets and reps are there. But it's working to the same principles, and maybe he works on a 12-week phase of training with a lighter period on the 12th week, for instance. But it's still the same kind of idea. The better your training is stringed together, the less need there is for deloads per se. Where I find you'll get deloads as they're termed, and I really don't jive with that term, is you get someone's like overreaching all the time. So someone's doing, like, they're doing rep outs 3 times a week or 3 weeks in a row, and then they need to do a deload because they're reaching a maximal effort 2 to 3 times in the gym, and the maximal effort doesn't need to be through weight in the bar. Maximal effort can be done through repetition. If you take a muscle to failure, all the motor units fire in the same manner they will do when you do a 1RM. You will recruit every muscle unit, and you bring in huge amounts of fatigue. So that kind of training leads to quick accumulation of fatigue, so you have a very short shelf life for that training, typically 2 to 3 weeks with that kind of training program. And then after the 3rd week, if you try to go for 4, you're probably just going to be petered out. You need a week of lighter training to start that process again. When you do that kind of training, you will get short, sharp responses. You will get very quick gains. You will get very strong very quickly. But after 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles, however many it is, maybe 6 cycles down the line, if you're not that well trained, you will stall, and eventually you're going to get injured doing that kind of training. It's pretty much just a matter of time. It's like with the Japanese kind of training you're saying. When you do that kind of training, your deload is when you get injured. Well, that isn't a deload. You have programmed incorrectly. You haven't taken into account the correct time frames of the tissues involved. So for instance, we've loaded with let's take something like John Brose's squat programming, for instance. We load high intensity day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out. Oh, no one gets injured. Oh fuck, I've ruptured my ACL, I've ruptured my MCL, I've caused cartilage damage. There hasn't been any sensitivity to the ligaments in the training. There's no been sensitivity to the cartilage. There's been no sensitivity taken to the muscles, and neurons respond very quickly to training. Tendons and ligaments and joints do not load. They do not respond to load very quickly. They respond to load very slowly. So you need to factor that into your training. You can't have high intensity all the time, and you need to build intensity over a reasonable period of time. You need to build intensities over a longer period of time. You need to have this kind of appreciation of the body when you put your training plans together. And something like Westside as well, for example, that kind of training eventually is going to lead to tears, ruptures, injuries. You look at the guys in the Elite FTS blogs, or you look at a lot of Elite FTS guys have like huge injury histories. Like Dave Tate's got a massive injury history. You shouldn't get that through lifting. It's not a very injurious sport. If you look at the injury rates within powerlifting, it's 3 per 1,000 hours of training. If you look at the injury rates within something like the Rugby World Cup, it's 83 injuries per 1,000 hours of competition. That is a much higher prevalence of training. It's like an order of magnitude more injuries within that sport. It's a contact sport. If you look within a sport like football, you're looking at like 16 to 20. I can't off the top of my head really say for a fact, but it's like maybe not 16 to 20. It was definitely like 11 to 12 injuries per 1,000 hours of training. It's like you're 4 times more likely to get injured doing football because it's an open sport. There's change of direction. There's ground reaction forces. Ground reaction forces are a lot higher than the forces you meet in the gym. When you jump and land, you're accepting 3 to 4 times your own body weight through your body. The forces are much higher. This is kind of so. I think I'm fairly happy with that. I mean, I probably haven't explained it perfectly. I probably dragged it out quite a bit. But But hopefully this has been a bit more of a nuanced explanation of deloads and why, from my opinion anyway, that the notion of a deload is flawed. And you should be thinking more of what Fazik was talking about. How do you get the rest to work ratio correct within your own training? How do you accomplish that? If you need to accomplish it by a 50% week, then I would say, as I said in my post, then you're definitely training with too much intensity and volume, and you need to look at what you're doing, because it's going to end at tissue failure at some stage, which shouldn't be the case with lifting before someone jumps on that. Okay, I've been Mark. This has been your daily strength coach podcast, your online strength coach podcast, daily somewhere or other, which isn't quite daily. It's struggling to be 2 to 3 times weekly at the minute. I will be back. I probably won't be back again this week. We're playing Ulster tomorrow, and I've got my brother over visiting, and the World Cup quarters are on, and Ireland or Scotland are playing on Sunday, so we'll be doing that. I don't do anything on Sunday, so I will be watching the rugby primarily, and drinking some beer as well, which will be great. Thanks for listening. I've been Mark. Any questions or comments, please leave them below. I will post this in the thread because fuck it, I've already recorded it, so it's going there anyway. I will interact with the thread as well. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them there. Send an email to speedpowerperformance@gmail.com if you'd like to interact out of the public eye, or if you have any questions or any training queries you'd like answered, or any problems I can help with you specifically. I'm more than happy to help. Thank you very much for listening. This is Mark of castironstrength.com and your onlinestrengthcoach.com. Signing off. Thank you very much. And I'll leave you with some fat bottom girls.